Hi, welcome to Curiosity. I'm Gary J, your host, and today I thought I'd ask the question, are shadow people real?
The desire to know and learn something.
You're listening to Gary J's Curiosity.
It's claimed that they're often seen in the corner of your eye, only to disappear. But it's also said that they come at night, out of the shadows to terrify their victims, as they often sit on them as they lay there, fully awake, but unable to move. But are these claims true? Well, first of all, if you don't know what shadow people are, let me explain. A shadow person is a perception of a patch of shadow that is a living humanoid figure, which is often seen in the peripheral vision of your eye or when you're laying in bed at night. In most occasions, these are seen as evil entities who often come in three distinct forms. One is that of an old woman who is said to have grey hair, dressed all in black, and is often described as looking like a witch. Again, that sounds very much like my mother-in-law. The second is what is called the Hat Man. He's said to be quite a large figure who wears a long black coat, a big black hat, with a wide rim. Now, if you look at the film Jeepers Creepers and look at the monster in that, it's claimed it looks very much like that, but with no facial features, and he was totally black. And in some cases, he's even been described as looking like Zorro. And the third version of this little team that actually sound like the group, the Thompson twins from the 1980s, is a smooth, all-black creature that is smaller than the Hat Man, but very slim. This is sometimes described as having red glowing eyes as well. Well, if you follow me on a regular basis and you've watched Curiosity on Amazon Prime, you will know I fake nothing and will actually go to some extreme lengths to find the answer rather than instantly claiming everything is paranormal. As a matter of fact, in all my time of filming Curiosity, I have ever only seen one thing that I can't debunk, and even that was in the editing later on and not actually at the time of filming. But for once, this is something I can actually verify happening because this has actually happened to me on a couple of occasions.
You're listening to the Curiosity podcast.
Well, like I said, this is something that I have personally experienced, but at the same time, as real as it seemed, I can't guarantee that it was something that was 100% paranormal or supernatural, simply because I have no evidence except my story, which is just a memory that seemed to flash up later on. But before I tell you my story, let's look at the background behind the shadow people.
Curiosity. Do something that scares you.
Well, claims of people seeing shadow beings go back hundreds of years, and there are a number of cultures, religions and belief systems that mention these in books, and in some cases are part of legends that have been passed down from generation to generation. But what are these beings? Some people claim that they are just evil entities from the other side who turn up in times of stress and who would like to make things just a little bit worse by choking you out and then put their hand over your mouth to stop you breathing. Which is great if you're into kinky sex, but not when you're trying to get some sleep at night. Now, how this generally works is that you're asleep, you wake up, but you're unable to move. Your eyes are wide open and you can see the room, but you're totally frozen. Well, the name given for this little exciting hell ride is sleep paralysis. And it's normally at this point that you'll get to see a dark figure, and then your nightmare really begins. So imagine you're trying to freak out and you can't move. For us men, you want to run away and hide like a little girl, but you're stuck to the sheets like they haven't been washed for a month. And for the ladies, it's like that moment when you're on a blind date, and it's at that point when he tells you he's actually really 60 and not 40 and lives with his mum and likes to collect Lego. It really is that bad. But there's also claims that these figures are actually aliens who turn up in your room and for some unknown reason do the exact same thing as I've just mentioned. But as I've already stated, I can assure you, whatever they are, it's an unsettling experience for everyone, and I've never heard anyone come out of the other side and say, "Oh my god, that was belting, let's go back in."
You're listening to the Curiosity podcast.
Well, my story actually starts when I was a kid, and I used to constantly see dark figures out of the corner of my eye, but only to look round and there'd be nothing there. But I remember having an episode of sleep paralysis while I was a kid laying on the couch, wasn't feeling very well, I had a blanket over me and it was broad daylight. But I remember opening my eyes and not being able to move and then going back to sleep and then waking up and everything was alright. Now as the years have gone on, I've just put that down to being a kid and my mind playing tricks on me. But moving forward to present day, about 10 or so years ago, I was laying in bed with my wife and then I woke up facing the opposite way from her. Now to be fair, this isn't an unusual thing. I mean, I do this quite a lot. I wake up at night and I'm facing the opposite direction or whatever. So this for us is not unusual. But what was unusual, that I was on my side, my eyes were open, I could see everything in the large mirror that was on the wardrobe door directly in front of me. But behind me there was a black smooth figure, exactly how I described earlier on, and it was sat on top of my wife. Now, it was at that point that I actually thought, bloody hell, what the hell's Patrick from across the road doing here? How dare he wake me up? Then I realised he was a lot slimmer than Patrick and had no facial features or any features at all. Now at this point I couldn't actually see my wife because my body was blocking the view of her in the mirror, but it did look like the figure had its arms in the position that you would use to strangle someone. Now when you read stories about this, people often say that they can hear certain things like buzzing, etc. But for me, I couldn't hear anything, I couldn't smell anything, and more to the fact, I just couldn't move. No matter what I did, I seriously couldn't move. No matter how much I tried, I really could not move a muscle. All I had to do was lie there and actually stare at what was actually going on. Now it was at that point everything seemed like a bit of a haze, and then all of a sudden I just fell back asleep. Now this might just be a coincidence, but from that moment on, the very next day, from the moment we woke up, our relationship changed. Our marriage broke down, my wife moved out, our lives turned to shit. Now I have to say at this point that even though I'd seen things as a kid which I'd mentioned before, I didn't know anything about shadow people, because now I was an adult, I'd just put it all behind me and looked at it as childish memories. But it must have been at least a few months after my wife had moved out that the memory of that night actually came back. So I did an internet search and that's when I came across a site called shadowpeople.org. Now I have to say at this point that I'm not actually being paid or even asked to advertise this site. Matter of fact, I haven't even spoken to the people. But if you're experiencing anything like this, I suggest that you make a visit, because there's story after story from loads of different people who have all gone through the same thing. Anyway, after a lot of hard work, my wife and I sorted everything out, and we're now happy, and touch wood, we've had no other episodes that relate to anything like that, thank God. But everything that happened that night was so real. It really did feel real, and it's still obviously in my head now. It's can't explain how vivid everything is. But I remember also having a dream when my wife and I had got back together, and we were in bed and I was asleep and she was asleep, and I remember having this dream about an overgrown garden with an old house in the background, and the Hat Man was actually chasing me around a water fountain, although at the time he was more grey than he was black, and it was in broad daylight. I remember I was that scared, I was screaming in the dream, and it was like at that point that my wife woke me up and she was asking if I was okay, and she said that I was whimpering, and then I screamed and I was sort of like freaking out and trying to fight. I can honestly say I have never ever been that scared in my life, and the realness of the whole thing will obviously stay with me forever, which it obviously has done.
Curiosity. Do something that scares you.
But what does science make of all this? Well, doctors say sleep paralysis is a condition that can be triggered by sleep deprivation, psychological stress, or abnormal sleep cycles. The underlying mechanism is believed to involve a dysfunction in REM sleep. But what is REM sleep? Well, according to Wikipedia, rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep for short, or REMS, is a unique phase of sleep in mammals and birds, distinguishable by random or rapid movement of the eyes, accompanied with low muscle tone throughout the body that makes the sleeper dream vividly. So does this mean that other mammals go through the same thing? Well, if you can answer that question, or have even had an episode of sleep paralysis, or have even been attacked by shadow people, let me know by leaving me a message. So, thanks for listening to the Curiosity Podcast. I'm Gary J, and remember there's a new podcast every Thursday. Plus, if you like what you've heard, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, Don't forget you can visit my website at curiosityuk.net, listen on SoundCloud, and you can now also watch my series Curiosity on Amazon Prime. So chat soon, and remember, do something that scares you.
The desire to know and learn something.
You're listening to Gary J's Curiosity.